Mr. Kirkman,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes.
Ms. Swift,
Yes.
Mr. Venable,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
Very well. By a vote of 8-0, the minutes of the December 8th, 2020 meeting have been approved as presented. Before we begin our public hearing this evening, on behalf of the commission, I would like to welcome everyone. The commission is charged with reviewing and making recommendations to the city council on a variety of development applications and on plans and policies for the city. Our review includes conducting a public hearing to obtain additional information and comments that could be important when evaluating an item. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting state restrictions on public gatherings, the commission is meeting remotely in accordance with state law. This has necessitated some changes to our normal meeting procedure, which I will take just a minute to explain. There are 8 commissioners present at City Hall this evening. Items on the agenda will be heard as normal, with a member of city staff presenting a summary of the application, followed by the staff's recommendation. The applicant and those assisting the applicant, all who are attending this meeting remotely, will then be given an opportunity to present information in support of the item. The planning and development staff published and sent notices that solicited the public to provide comments on these items by email, phone, or letter. The period for public comment on these items will extend for an additional 24 hours beyond the conclusion of tonight's hearings. For that reason, the commission will not be voting on any hearing item on tonight's agenda. Instead, this meeting will be recessed to Thursday, January 28th at 6:00 p.m. This allows the commission to further discuss any additional information or comments submitted by the public before making an official recommendation to the city council. Before we begin our public hearing items this evening, the first item, which is Winfield Properties Incorporated Zoning Amendment 2024, Commissioner Morgan wants to read a statement.
Thank you. I would like to put this statement in the record. I have had previous and possible future relationships with applicant Winfield Properties and have no financial interest in this project or its outcome.
Very well. Do any commissioners have an issue with Mr. Morgan participating in this item? Very well. No opposition, no comments. We'll move along to Mr. Shannon, who will present Winfield Properties Incorporated Zoning Map Amendment 20-24.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Herb Shannon, Senior Planner with the City of High Point Planning Department, and I will be providing you with a summary of Zoning Map Amendment Request 20-24. I would note that I will go into a little bit of extra detail. Staff has had about 20 to 30 phone calls from the public, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail just to address some of those questions that from the phone calls I received that other members of the public may have similar questions. This is a request to establish initial city zoning for a 28-acre parcel lying along the north side of West Wendover Avenue, approximately 800 feet east of the intersection of West Wendover Avenue and Morris Farm Road. I would note that the site also has frontage along Morris Farm Road. This is a map of the site. Just to orient everyone, that area that's outlined in the blue with the note site in the middle, that is a site in question. It is lying along that north side, as you see, of West Wendover Avenue. The applicant has submitted an annexation petition to allow connection to city utilities and a zoning map amendment request to establish the conditional zoning or residential multifamily 16 or CZ RM16 zoning on the site to support development of a multifamily project. Except for 2 vacant single-family homes on the site that front along West Wendover Avenue, the rest of the site is undeveloped. A perennial stream runs from the northeast to the southwestern portion of the site. The stream is that blue line that you see cutting through the site, and those areas highlighted in gray are the various flood zones associated with the stream. This is a topography map of the site. There is also a 50-foot wide Piedmont Natural Gas easement that runs from north to south through the middle of the site. The site's steeper terrain is along this stream corridor. Right in the middle, that blue line's a stream. You have a floodway, 100-year flood zone, and 500-year flood zone. For those who are not familiar looking at a topography maps, where the lines are further apart, the land is fairly level. Where the lines are close together, the land is fairly steep. Where you see those darker lines, those are 10-foot increments in topography. And as you can see from some of the topography there, you have a 30 to 50 foot drop in topography along that stream corridor. That corridor basically divides this site in half. Although you may have 20 acres of land, once you factor in that stream location and the flood zone areas, you can see how the site's somewhat divided by the stream and the flood zone areas. This is a blow up of the site. As for zoning in this area, for those members of the public, the area that is highlighted in white, those are areas that are already within the City of High Point's corporate limits that have already been annexed. Those areas highlighted in gray have not been annexed. Those are unincorporated land still under Guilford County zoning control. The zoning sites currently outside the city limits, as I previously noted, the applicant has submitted an annexation petition and this application to establish initial city zoning on the site. To the north of the site is the Parkway Village single-family subdivision. That site has a planned development limited PDL zoning district that was obtained in 2000. That zoning approval allows single-family or multifamily development at a density of 10 units per acre. To the west of the site, along Tarrant Road and Morris Farm Road, that area has a RM16 residential multifamily 16 zoning. Between 1995 and 2003, there have been approximately 12 zoning applications approved that initially established conditional use RM16 zoning for those areas. Directly west of the site is a Riverview multifamily development, Riverview townhome development, and the Parkway Village multifamily development. As you may recall, late last year, staff presented to the commission as part of our comprehensive zoning map amendment, rezoning that area to the west from conditional use residential multifamily 16 to RM16, as those zoning conditions that were in some cases over 20 years old had all been met. All that area has been developed, and that's part of the comprehensive zoning map amendment. Those obsolete zoning conditions were removed, and just the RM16 zoning has been established to that area to the west. I would note, because I did receive some calls about impacts to the schools in this area with any type of development, as anytime there is a residential development, as a courtesy and to help the commission and council with questions, staff county schools gave them informational requests, and there's a table for informational purposes only in the staff report as to school impact, and that is directly from the Guilford County schools. There's also been quite a few questions as to access. The applicant is proposing that vehicle access be taken from Morris Farm Road. This site has about 570 feet of frontage along Morris Farm Road, and there will be at least 2 access points, possibly 3 access points from this collector street. The applicant's proposal for a 216-unit multifamily development was evaluated by the Transportation Department. The Transportation Department noted that such a development would generate over 1,600 trips a day with approximately 123 to 147 AM and peak hour trips. The Transportation Department had determined that a traffic impact analysis was not required. Such a study is only required for a residential development that generates over 150 trips within the AM or PM peak hours. I would note included with this application is a conditional zoning ordinance in which the applicant has offered conditions to restrict on the site where development may be permitted, to limit the site's density, or if they exceed a certain density limit, they've offered a condition that they will have a traffic impact analysis prepared and that any improvements from that analysis be installed. They've also offered conditions for restricting the location of vehicle access as well as providing for right-of-way dedication. As we get into the analysis, I would note that lands along the north side of the West Wendover Avenue corridor, lying between Premier Drive and Hickory Grove Road, are designated on the adopted land use plan for medium density residential on the city's land use plan. This is a depiction of the city's land use plan for this area. Those areas that are noted in that darker brown color, the land use plan has designated for medium density residential use, which is intended to accommodate a variety of higher density residential uses, including townhomes and apartments at a density of 8 to 16 units per acre. And as you can see, that runs along that almost that whole length of that north side of this portion of the corridor. I would also note there is a corridor plan governing this area, the West Window Avenue Gifford College Road Corridor Plan. Key points of policies from that corridor plan is policy recommendations to restricting or limiting the number of vehicle access points to West Window Avenue. And the plan does support higher density residential development along the north side of West Window Avenue outside the watershed critical area. A conditional zoning plan has been submitted as part of the conditional zoning ordinance. This plan divides the site into 2 tracts with the stream bisecting the site being the division line. This is a copy of that conditional zoning plan that has been provided, and there's specific conditions that the applicant has offered pertaining to Tract A, that northern portion of the site, and Tract B. The applicant has noted that for Tract A, development density should be based only upon that land area. That basically you can't use any of that Tract B area for determining density. Development in Tract A has to be based on that land area in Tract A. As previously noted, the applicant is proposing a 216-unit multifamily development, which is a density of about 10 units per acre. And as previously noted, if development exceeds a certain limit, in this case, if they exceed 220 dwelling units, then their condition kicks in that they would have to do a traffic impact analysis. And any improvements to the roadway, signalized intersections, there is a signalized intersection at Wendover Avenue and Morris Farm Road. There's also a signalized intersection to the north at Piedmont Parkway and Morris Farm Road. Any improvements from that traffic impact analysis, the applicant would be responsible for installing those improvements if they exceed 220 dwelling units. As far as Tract B, the applicant has offered a condition that that area is to remain undeveloped. And just to assist you in that, when you look at this site, you see that wide open area, and staff have received several calls. How's the site going to develop? Where they're placing buildings? Staff has noted to the public that there is no binding site plan at this time. The main point that the City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to be looking at is based upon adopted land use policies, is this an appropriate location for multifamily uses? Staff put together this slide to kind of help you see the restrictions on the site. As previously noted, the stream is the division line, and you have those flood zone areas and that gas lines. So when you look at it just, okay, here's the zoning map, it looks like there's a lot of land area, but when you factor in those environmental constraints, that area north of the stream starts to be reduced as the amount of land area you have for development. That land area south of the stream, there's not much left over. And as previously noted, the applicant has offered a condition that no development on that area south of the stream. They will be focusing on development the area to the north and staying out of those environmentally sensitive areas. Based upon the applicant's submittal, staff offers the following comments. As to compatibility of the surrounding area, the requested CZRM16 district supports the same type of residential uses that are already established on adjacent lands along the north side of West Wendover Avenue and along Morris Farm Road. As you travel along Wendover Avenue past Premier Drive, you have that medical center. There's a new apartment complex being built. You have the Tarrant, the Trace townhome development, the Laurel Bluff apartment complex, the Timberbrook condominium development. Directly west of this site, you have the Riverview multifamily development and townhome development in the Parkway Village multifamily development. So over the past 30 years, this area was established as and developed with multiple multifamily type uses. There is a single family subdivision directly to the north of the site, and the development ordinance has a requirement that where multifamily uses abut single family detached dwellings, a minimum 15-foot wide type C planting yard is required. So if the site develops with multifamily uses, the development ordinance would require that planting yard along the northern property line where the site does abut that existing single-family development. As to minimizing adverse impacts on nearby lands, standards of the development ordinance pertaining to perimeter landscaping, parking lot landscaping, exterior lighting, open space for multifamily developments would apply. Furthermore, the development ordinance provides standards for screening of solid waste collection areas and screening electrical equipment. I would note the site does front along I believe that's Parkway Village Drive to the north. As you look at the northern part of the site, you see that cul-de-sac that kind of butts the site. The zoning site does have about 27 to 28 feet of frontage along that cul-de-sac. To mitigate traffic impact to this neighborhood, the applicant has offered a condition that unless it is associated with a single-family development, there would be no access for a multifamily use to that cul-de-sac. We also looked at environmental impacts, and as the previous slide I show you where there's a stream, the development ordinance requires that for a perennial stream, a 100-foot wide stream buffer on both sides of that stream, so you have a minimum 20-foot wide stream buffer area is required. And the applicant would be, or any property owner would be subject to City Lake General Watershed requirements. And if you exceed a certain amount of impervious coverage, stormwater control measures would be required. As for impacts on city facilities, as previously noted, this site is surrounded by various developments within the city. City services, water, sewer line, and service vehicles are already established in this area. If more than 200 dwelling units are proposed, when they go through the review process, if approved, they would have to do that traffic impact study and install any improvements from that study. And I would note the applicant has offered a condition to prohibit access from West Wendover Avenue to address policy objectives of the Wendover Avenue Guilford College corridor plan to maintain that as a travel corridor. And that plan to maintain that looks at restricting or
Have a good one.
in conclusion, I would note that we also looked at if there's a zoning change or any policies or the preferred development pattern. Well, the requested CZ RM16 district and allowable uses is consistent to what has been developed in the area. Similar zoning, similar uses as already developed. And this is established from the West Wendover Avenue Guilford College Plan, which was established in 1995. Land use policies have supported high intensity residential development in this portion of the city along West Wendover Avenue, Piedmont Parkway, and Tarrant Road. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of this request to rezone this 28.2 acre site to a conditional zoning RM16 district. Staff finds that the request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because as conditioned, the requested CZ RM16 district is supported by relevant goals and objectives of the land use plan and the West Wendover Avenue Guilford College Road corridor plan. And the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the zoning map amendment proposes to establish similar zoning as exists on abutting land, which enable a development pattern consistent with this portion of the West Wendover Avenue corridor and along Morris Farm Road. As always, the commission must include in their recommendation a consistency and reasonableness statement, and we do offer that language that's in the staff report. I did go into a little bit more detail to hopefully address some of the questions that the public may have. Are there any questions from the commission at this time?
Want to have any questions for Mr. Shannon?
Yes,
Chair
sir.
recognizes Mr. Uzak.
Mr. Shannon, you said that the applicant is going to develop at least 2 or possibly more access points along Morris Farm Road.
Yes.
And as I look at the map here, where this property is adjacent to or with alongside Morris Farm is not particularly a lot of there's not much room there.
There's about 570 feet roughly. Just to assist you with that, if you look at where it says Morris Farm Road, that's about near the southern portion of the frontage of the site. And where it says farm, that M, that's about the northern part of the site. Those are all that area between is their frontage on the site. They would have to work with the Transportation Department where there's specific standards for separation and so forth. But at a minimum, they're going to need to have at least 2 access points.
Right, and there's enough room there for them to do at least 2 access.
Yes, and Transportation Department, if you want more detail as to the separation requirement, they'll be glad to help you. But there is sufficient room for 2, possibly 3 access points.
That's fine. Just wanted to make sure of that.
Chair recognizes Mr. Venable.
Mr. Shannon, this question kind of follows on that. And I was wondering when you mentioned possibly 3, with that third one, or could that third one potentially be, if this became a single family, that cul-de-sac to the neighborhood to the north of this? Could that could be an access point though, if depending
The
on the
most you
development?
can do would be carve off a single-family lot,
Okay,
and that lot take access. To have any type of road extension from that cul-de-sac, the right-of-way has to be at least 50 feet wide.
okay,
There's only about 28 feet of frontage on that cul-de-sac, so it's not wide enough for a road extension. It would be enough where you can carve off a single-family lot and have just a driveway access for one home there.
okay.
Anything else, Mr. Shannon? I'll follow with one question. As far as site plan, you mentioned there's no binding site plan available, which isn't really our job anyway. I assume that if this was approved, that will go before technical review committee, and they'd be required to conform to all city standards and
Yes.
requirements within the ordinance.
Yes, they would, if approved, any type of site development would need to be approved by the city's technical review committee, which we call the TRC. And it's not just a site plan. They would look at the grading plan, stormwater plan. If a stormwater control device is required, they would have to get that approved. And then once that's done, they would have to have their site plan approved. And as part of that, transportation department, building, public service, engineering service, and the planning department would all look at that plan, and they would have to meet all city and state requirements.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Shannon? Chair recognizes Mr. Wheatley.
I saw that one of the neighbors were concerned about traffic. Obviously, it's going to create more traffic, but then they also mentioned sidewalks. And I think I've been down that road maybe 10 times, and I don't remember seeing any sidewalks on that road.
That would be part of the site plan review process to make a determination if sidewalks would be required, or I think we may have a situation along Wendover Avenue. It may be payment in lieu of, but that's part of the review by the technical review committee. Does the project meet the requirements or standards to require sidewalks? But that is part of our review.
But some of those subdivisions in there are fairly new, and I don't remember any sidewalks going.
None of
down
those
that road.
subdivisions out there have sidewalks. Under the new development ordinance, which came into effect in 2017, based upon the intensity of the development and the type of road you're on, sidewalks could potentially be required. But at the time all of those developments came into effect, there was no requirements for sidewalks.
Chair recognizes Commissioner Swift.
Just have a couple of questions. I want to clarify, you said there would be no entrance off of Wendover, correct? They would
Correct. The
all be out-
applicants offer condition, no access from Wendover. From our initial discussions with them, it's you have to either cross that stream or at the southwestern portion of the site where they do have frontage along Wendover for Track A, that topography is extremely steep with a 50-foot drop from the property line to the stream.
Then the other question I had was, you said the medium density was from 8 to 16. They're trying to get this rezoned to 16. What is the, do you know what the I know it's medium density, but the townhomes or the condos that are right there off of Morse Farm Road, there would be right beside it, they're back up. Do you know what that density is?
I do not know what those densities are. At the time they were developed, it was under the prior development ordinance, which had development up to 12 units per acre. So it's probably around that 12 units per acre. I know that PDL to the north, if it had not developed for single family, it would have been multifamily at 10 units per acre. With the 216 units we're proposing, that's approximately 10 units per acre.
Anything else for Mr. Shannon? If not, thank you, sir. Is the applicant present with us this evening?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, sir. Would you have anything to present?
Yes. My name is Craig Stone with Winfield Properties, 5614 Riverdale Drive, Jamestown, North Carolina. Appreciate very much members of the Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff allowing us a chance to speak. Winfield Properties, as you know, 50-year-old company. This is an extension of the seventh community we've done throughout High Point, Admiral, Addington, Kirkwood, Hartley, Abbey Crossing, Avondale, to name a few. Our community consists of 216 units, we hope, for families in the area, broader area workforce folks. We chose the site because of its location and lifestyle amenities for those folks that we serve. Felt that it was a dynamic location, one that offered access to employment, a number of different things for the community, no different than any one of us ourselves would want. So really did like the area, felt like it was a good area, long-term value. We are an investor in this site. We'll have guarantees, those types of things, and felt like it's an area that would be one long-term of good value, which is something that we look for in an investment itself. We're serving folks that are up to 70% of the area median income, and have worked with a number of the different departments throughout the process. We did consult with the High Point Transportation Department, felt like, some of what we had met with them to this point would meet some of the conditions as we move forward. One of the things I will add, we will be required, if we are successful moving forward, to meet with the TRC folks and go through that process and other departments, and we'll be bound by whatever restrictions or guidelines are put into effect as we move through the process. So again, my name is Craig Stone. Wanted to present myself if there are any questions, and appreciate very much the consideration.
Thank you, sir. Any of the commissioners have any questions for Mr. Stone? Thank you very much, sir. Normally, this is where we would hear from the public. Of course, we're meeting remotely, and I have been advised by city staff that we have gotten some comments and letters, and the public has another 24 hours subsequent to our meeting this evening, and those will be provided to us Thursday, which we can then discuss them when we resume this meeting on Thursday evening and make our recommendation. In the meantime, any of the commissioners have any discussion or comments on this request? Very well. If not, we will table this request until Thursday evening, and we'll move to the next item on our agenda this evening, which is High Point University Zoning Map Amendment 20-25.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is a request to rezone a 37.5 acre city block bounded by North Centennial Street, East Lexington Avenue, Cantor Drive, and East Ferris Avenue. This is a larger scale map showing that zoning site. As you may recall, in 2019, High Point University obtained zoning approval to expand the boundary of their campus to include this neighborhood. That zoning approval was for a conditional zoning institutional district. It included all the land within this block except for two parcels, a single family home at 1215 McCain Place and a single family home at 1202 North Centennial Street, which remain with an R5 zoning district. This is a blow up of that area. The area in purple was what was rezoned in 2019. And we point out those two single family dwellings that in 2019 were not part of that previous zoning approval. In the university has since purchased these two remaining parcels in this block and has submitted a zoning amendment to include them into their previous zoning approval. This new zoning application carries forward all the previously adopted zoning conditions from that 2019 zoning approval. The only difference is the legal descriptions of these two homes are now included in those conditions. Thus, all the land within this block is proposed to be zoned conditional zoning institutional district and all governed by the same conditional zoning ordinance. As I previously noted, those previous conditions pertaining to allowable uses, development and dimensional standards, landscape buffering and fencing and vehicle access, all those conditions are being carried forward into this new request. Key points I would point out from the analysis, as far as compatibility with the surrounding area, the rezoning of the two remaining residential zone parcel in this area does not change the prior compatibility findings from the previous zoning approval. And to ensure there are no adverse impacts on adjacent land, the applicant is carrying forward all those previous adopted zoning conditions. Based on the previously adopted zoning conditions that are being carried forward, the request will not increase impacts or negative impacts on adjacent lands. And this request is supported by land use policy. Since 2000, the university expanded their campus westward, historically from Panther Drive, which is formerly known as West College Drive, to North Centennial Street. The inclusion of these two remaining lots in this into the CZ institutional district for this area is a logical expansion of the campus and consistent with policies of the core city plan. Thus, staff is recommending approval of this request to rezone this 37.5 acre area to a conditional zoning institutional district. The request is consistent with adopted policy guidance because the zoning site is designated as institutional by the land use plan and supported by policy of the core city plan. Furthermore, the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the rezoning request will incorporate the two remaining residentially zoned properties into the campus and create a unified zoning district for all the lands within this area. That is a brief summary of this request. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Any questions for Mr. Shannon? Thank you, sir. Is the applicant present this evening?
Yes, good evening. My name is Barry Kitley at 4114 Ponce de Leon Drive, High Point, North Carolina.
Yes,
I'd
sir.
like to thank everyone for their time tonight, and I'm available for any questions, and I humbly request your support. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Catley this evening? Very well, thank you, sir. Any discussion from the commissioners? I don't believe we did not receive any public comments on this particular item. Again, the public does have another 24 hours to make comments if they wish. So we will set this one on the table until Thursday evening and move on to the next item on tonight's agenda. Curry Corporation Zoning Map Amendment 20-26.
Yes, our next item is zoning map amendment ZA 20-26. This is a request to establish initial city High Point zoning for a 9.5 acre site located at the southeast corner of Gallimore Dairy Road and South Chimney Rock Road. This is a large scale map of this northern portion of the city. The area you see highlighted in white are lands that are already within the city limits. The zoning site is noted in red, and this is at the northern limits of the city's planning area. And this is a blow up of that site in question. The site currently has an agricultural zoning under Guilford County zoning jurisdiction. The applicant has submitted an annexation petition to allow connection to city utilities, and this zoning map amendment request to establish a conditional zoning light industrial district for the site to support a future industrial project. Included with this application is a conditional zoning ordinance in which the applicant has offered conditions to combine the lots prior to development and to meet most of the district standards of the employment center district. This property is situated at the northern edge of the city's planning area and is designated by the land use plan as restricted industrial development. This is a copy of the city's land use plan for that portion of the city's planning area. The area you see highlighted in that purple is those lands that are designated by the land use plan for restricted industrial development. This land use classification is intended to accommodate office, warehouse, research and development, distribution, light manufacturing, and assembly uses, and is intended for larger sites in a unified development. There have been several zoning approvals for industrial type uses in this portion of the city's planning area, as this site is at the northern edge of the Piedmont Center Industrial Park. And as you can see, the property directly to the east has CULI zoning, and to the south, that's where you get into the Piedmont Center Industrial Park. All of that area has a CULI district zoning. Under the new development ordinance, which became effective in 2017, there were specific standards that established the EC district, EC zoning district. At the time, those abutting parcels to the east and south were granted zoning approval. They were granted conditional use light industrial, but were conditioned to meet the higher standards of the former corporate park district. With the adoption of the new development ordinance in 2017, that corporate park district was eliminated, and the EC district was established to support development within those portions of the city that are designated as restricted industrial. The applicant on this application has elected not to request an EC district. They've requested a conditional zoning of light industrial to match the zoning in the surrounding area. However, to ensure that development is governed by similar higher development standards, they have offered conditions that the site meet district standards of the EC or the employment center district, the one exception being exemption to the building orientation standard, but all other EC district standards, the applicant has offered conditions to meet those. Key points that staff will point out from the staff analysis, as far as compatibility with the surrounding area, the primary concern was visual impacts to the adjacent area, including Piedmont Center. By conditioning development to the EC district standards, the applicant is ensuring that future use of the property will promote compatibility with the adjacent CULI districts. And some of those standards are how loading docks are faced, screening requirements. Those are some of those higher standards, architectural standards. The applicants of the EC district, the applicant has offered to meet those requirements. As far as mitigating impacts with the surrounding lands already developed, the requested CZLI district will not adversely impact adjacent lands, as adjacent lands to the east and south are already zoned for industrial use. And those lands to the north within the city of Greensboro have similar industrial zoning. Supportive change and promoting a preferred development pattern. As previously noted, prior zoning approvals for that CULI district had higher standard. The applicant has offered condition to have a continuation of that zoning pattern and those higher standards. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of this request to rezone this site to a conditional zoning light industrial district. I would note that as there are pending NCDOT projects along Galloway Dairy Road, in which road acquisition will begin later this year, and based on consultation with the city attorney's office, the Transportation Department is withdrawing their recommendation for a condition for right-of-way dedication. I would just quickly go over the consistency statement. The request is consistent with adopted policy guidance. As conditioned, the requested CZLI district meets objectives of the community growth vision statement and the land use plan by specifically protecting the appearance of the Gallimore Dairy Road corridor and for continued restricted industrial development as designated. And the request is reasonable in the public interest because as conditioned to meet district standards of the employment center district, the requested CZLI district will be similar to and compatible with previous conditional zoning light industrial zoning districts approved in this area. That is a quick summary of this request. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Any questions for Mr. Sherman? Thank you, sir. I don't believe we got any public comments this item thus far. I'll remind members of the public maybe joining us this evening, they do have another 24 hours to submit any comments or suggestions. Do the commissioners have any comments or deliberation on this item? Very well, if not, I will close the public hearing on this item this evening, and we will review any public comments received Thursday evening when we reconvene. Oh, excuse me. Is the applicant present with us this evening?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize. I get used to seeing people in the room, and then we do these remote meetings, and the faces aren't here.
No worries.
Do you have anything you'd like to present?
Yes, just briefly.
Was that a yes?
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. My name is Mike Fox. I'm an attorney with the law firm.
We're having a bit of trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry.
You start with your name and address for the record. Anyone there?
Yes, if you give us 1 second, we are trying to dial in by our phone.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, we're not making a good connection or something here.
Give us 1 second and we'll dial in.
Sure.
Okay? If you would bear with us just 1 second.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, that's perfect.
Yes, I'm sorry, we were having technical difficulties there on our computer. So my name is Mike Fox, and I'm an attorney representing the applicant here tonight, and I'm with Tuggle Duggins. Our address is 400 Belmead Street in Greensboro, North Carolina. We want to just briefly tell you a little bit of what we plan to do with this site. I've got here with me tonight Richard Venori from Corey Corporation. They are the developer of this site. And also Anthony Lester is on the phone if we need him. He's the site engineer and he's available for questions. We appreciate all the good work with the staff through this process. They've been very helpful in guiding us to get to a point where we can do a good development and meet the standards that you have there in High Point, but also have the flexibility to be able to get a good tenant into this site. As you have heard from the staff, they are recommending approval of this. We did send letters out to all the neighbors and have not heard anything back from anyone, which to me would indicate that no one has any problem with it. And I don't believe you've had anybody sign up tonight to speak. So we would hope that on your meeting on Thursday that you would recommend approval of this to go to the city council for the original zoning and the annexation. With that, I'm going to hand it to Richard Venori and let him tell you just a very brief summary about who they are and what they plan to do.
Very good.
Good evening, members of the commission. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Richard Venori. I'm the president of Corey Corporation. I reside at 1807 Nottingham Road in Greensboro. As you know, Corey Corporation is a family-owned company, family-owned and operated. We're headquartered here in Greensboro. We're proud of what we've accomplished in Guilford County over the last 68 years. While 100% of our development activities have occurred in Guilford County, this marks the first time Corey Corporation has developed or owned a piece of property in the High Point jurisdiction. I'll point this out. So this is an exciting moment for us. I'll point this out to highlight our commitment and dedication to Guilford County. As evident throughout the community, we're passionate about our developments and we fully intend to create another one here with this piece of land. Given its strategic location to a vital transportation network and its geographic position, that being surrounded by adjacent industrial neighbors, we believe this particular development tract to be an outstanding infill location for its proposed type. Please note that we're not merchant developers. We're committed to the end. We're a fully integrated company capable of all levels of real estate development. If allowed to proceed, you'll see Corey owned and operated graded and infrastructure equipment in the beginning, a vertical construction team by Corey throughout the process, and ultimately Corey management and personnel on site perpetually thereafter. We're committed to the effort. In closing, please accept our sincere thank you for your service and your consideration. Thank you.
Very good. Are there any questions from Mr. Benoit or Mr. Fox regarding this request? Thank you, gentlemen. In that case, and unless there are some comments or questions from the commissioners, I'll close the public hearing on this item for this evening, and we will review any public comments we may receive over the next 24 hours when we reconvene on Thursday evening. We'll now move to the final item on tonight's agenda, City of High Point street name change 20-01.
Yes, your final public hearing item is a street naming change. The city of High Point has submitted an application to rename several streets due to the NCDOT street widening and realignment associated with the East Chester Drive I-74 interchange improvement project. And this is a map showing those proposed street names. This is just north of the East Chester Drive intersection with I-74. And the street names, there are several along both sides of this portion of the East Chester Drive corridor. I would note there are 9 parcels abutting the street proposed for naming. However, only 3 parcels are impacted in such a way that will affect readdressing or mailing address. Just to briefly go through this proposal, the area outlined in purple along that west side of East Chester Drive is proposed naming for Cypress Court. You have a teal color for the proposed renaming of Hilton Court. Along the east side of East Chester Drive, proposed Gordon Court and proposed Gordon Road. If you had a chance to drive out in this area recently, you'd see that the NCDOT road improvements is proceeding along, and those street realignments have been completed or in the final stages of being completed. But just to remind you what it previously looked like, let's see, sorry about that. This is an aerial before they started the construction. You can see where Cypress Court to the left and Gordon Road to the right previously intersect at a signalized intersection. That intersection has been removed and moved a few hundred feet to the north to provide some separation from the work that's being done at the I-74 interchange. But that is how it was previously laid out. And this is how it is laid out now. As far as Cypress Court, that initial access to East Chester Drive has been removed. That area highlighted in purple notes how that street has been extended. And this application proposes to officially name that newly constructed street extension that's outlined in purple to Cypress Court. The 3 impacted parcels as far as addressing are along this extension, where you see 1701 East Chester Drive and 1705 East Chester Drive. Those parcels previously abutted East Chester Drive and took their access from East Chester Drive. With that extension of Cypress Court, those properties no longer have frontage or access from East Chester Drive. So there would be some pending address changes to note that. As for Hilton Court, that previously extended and directly tied into East Chester Drive. It has been realigned so that it now ties into that extension of Cypress Court. Where you see right at that intersection 2209-R or 2209 rear Hilton Court, that address will also have to change. That is undeveloped parcel that is owned by NCDOT. Just to go back to the previous slide, this was one large parcel at one time. When the road extension went through, it divided that in half, and that small little sliver of property was given that address. That address would have to change either to an East Chester Drive or most likely a Cypress Court address. But the Hilton Court has been realigned, no longer intersects with East Chester Drive, and that's about 150 feet of that former Hilton Court name is being changed to Cypress Court, as that is the presiding flow of traffic in that area at Hilton Court, as you see stubs into Cypress Court. On the opposite side, you see Gordon Court and Gordon Road. That area highlighted in red, that was the previous Gordon Road that intersected with East Chester Drive to an intersection. That intersection has been moved further north, the signalized intersection. That connection to East Chester Drive has been removed and a cul-de-sac developed. So it's proposed that that area be renamed to Gordon Court. The realignment of Gordon Road, you have the roundabout, and the area highlighted in blue is a street extension where Gordon Road has been extended. And this request officially proposes to rename that extension to Gordon Road. In preparation for the public hearing, mailed notices were sent to all abutting property owners, and a public advertisement was submitted to the High Point Enterprise. Any type of street naming requires findings. The first is that the street name change is in accordance with the city's street name and address assignment guidelines. Staff has noted compliance. This street name request will promote the goals and objectives of the policy and will provide consistency in street names due to the public road construction realignment project from NCDOT. We also looked at that the street name change will serve the public interest and enhance public safety. This street alignment will eliminate confusion among motorists and emergency service providers. And the requested name change and future readdress in the Cypress Court will provide predictability as to how the general public and emergency service response vehicles would access those properties, specifically the 1701 and 1705 East Chester Drive with that readdressing of that area. It can be confusing when you have an address on for a property that doesn't have any frontage or takes access from that street. Also, we look at that the request not adversely affect the value of land or cause any excessive economic impact to the landowners. The proposed street naming change, although there are 3 parcels we're addressing will be changed, only 2 are developed. Those are those 2 single-family homes along the Cypress Court extension. And finally, that the street name change will result in an overall public good and generally cannot be measured in monetary terms. The name change does not result in any significant cost to the city. The most expensive signs is going to be the one at the signalized intersection. Those are the larger DOT signs that notes this way for Cypress Court and this way for Gordon Road. Those have already been installed. Furthermore, the request serves the overall public good by ensuring there will be a logical naming of streets in this area once this NCDOT interchange improvement project is completed. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of this request, and staff recommends that the change become effective upon adoption. I would remind the commission for street naming requests, they do not go to city council. The P&Z makes the final decision on such requests. That is a quick summary of this application. Are there any questions of staff at this time?
Chair recognizes Mr. Uzak.
The property that's listed here as 1666 East Chester, how do people get there?
Currently, that site has a driveway that comes off of Gordon Road. I believe that driveway goes behind 1670 and serves 1670 and goes to 1660.
I see.
And that's their current access now.
Thank you.
I assume that you did not receive any public comments on this item for the time being.
I received one call just wondering from a property owner, when will it be complete?
Oh, okay. Any more questions for Mr. Shannon? Any comments or suggestions from the commissioners? If not, I'll close the public hearing on this item, and we will take this up again on Thursday evening as we prepare to make a recommendation. All 4 public hearing items will be tabled, and we'll pick them up again Thursday evening. I want to remind the public that they do have a subsequent 24 hours in which to submit public comments or questions. You may do so by email to build@highpointnc.gov or by calling 336-883-3522 and leaving a message. Or you may drop off written comments in High Point's utility drop boxes located on both sides of the municipal building at 211 South Hamilton Street in the Green Drive, Commerce Avenue parking lots. Regardless of how your comments are made, please be sure to include the case number so it can be applied to the correct case. All comments must be received by the end of the day tomorrow, Wednesday, January 27th, and we will make our final recommendation to council Thursday evening, the 28th, beginning at 6 p.m. in this room. That concludes the public hearing portion for this evening. We will move to the director's report.
Thank you. Good evening. I just have a couple of things to just call to your attention. At the December meeting of City Council, they approved the 2 text amendments that the commission had previously enacted on at their December meeting, which is the Watershed Protection Amendment as well as the Wireless Telecommunication Amendment. Both those amendments are currently in effect. The other 2 things I want to just call your attention to are 2 land use assessments. As you may recall, Heidi Galante from my staff provided a briefing to you back in the fall with regards to the Eastchester land use assessment, as well as Eastchester Drive, I-74, excuse me, land use assessment, and the Jamestown bypass land use assessment. Since that time, we've also briefed the city council and also held 2 virtual public meetings, received public comments. We are finalizing those reports. They should be posted and distributed to the public fairly soon. And these 2 items will be on your agenda for your February meeting. Because these are written reports, we will advance them to you ahead of the agenda. So it's very likely you receive these next week. In fact, once we make them public, we'll be sending them to the commission members as well. So you can look at them ahead of time in advance of the February meeting where you'll hold a hearing and also give consideration to those 2 reports and the recommendations contained in it. In brief, that's all I had. Just call attention that your next meeting is on February the 23rd.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
It's on an unrelated matter. It's something I've wrestled with, and maybe some of the other commissioners do as well. You know, we often sort of wrestle with the project versus the zoning. We're planning and zoning commission. Our business is zoning. Is it appropriate? A lot of times, on the years I've been on the commission now, you may not rezone something because you didn't like the project that was going there. And as we talked about, you know, the zoning runs with the land, not the project. What is that? You've been doing this for a long time, and where's the diehard separation? You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I do. The thing you always have to keep in the back of your mind is that, just like you said, the zoning runs with the land. That a project, a developer, an applicant, a property owner, whoever appears before you could have all the good intentions of the world to do a project, and for whatever reason, as we saw with the recession back in the early part of the 2000s, things do change. And projects that came before the commission at that time never got built and were changed, got partially built and came back and got changed. So that's the things you need to keep in the forefront of your mind. And so the general rule of thumb is typically is, you know, when you're approving a zoning district, you should be comfortable with all the land uses allowed in that zoning district based on all the standards, you know, of that district. In many cases, particularly here in High Point, you'll see conditional zoning, and often that enables somebody who has a specific project in mind to get a little more fine-tuned, if you will, with regards to the standards that apply to that particular tract of land. So they're enabled to say, okay, I can do these type of standards, or I can offer this level of landscaping. And sometimes you'll see as a commission that if it doesn't happen, the next guy is back in front of you because he can't meet that standard, and he's got to change that standard. And so he will make, or she will make, an argument before the commission and city council, you know, of a different approach, maybe to address that concern. So again, you really can't get so focused on what someone is saying. You shouldn't be making your decision solely on what they're saying, or more specifically, the illustration that they're showing you, unless in some form or fashion that illustration is conditioned. So they may show you a pretty picture, then they say this is how we intend it to look. But unless there's some attachment to the conditional zoning ordinance, and sometimes you'll see there'll be a sketch, a zoning plan, conditional zoning plan that's attached to the ordinance that will lay out some condition. And you saw that tonight with the very first item that had conditions as it relates to track 1 and track 2 of the site. And so there are conditions that if approved by the city council would restrict different portions of that site differently. And so that applies not just that owner, but
that
others.
was approved and they'd be bound by their conditions, and then they decide not to do this, and a subsequent buyer picks up the property.
Yeah.
Do those conditions then apply?
Yes.
To him as well?
Yes.
So the conditions run with the land, it becomes part of the zoning?
Unless it's changed.
Right, unless they come back and ask
Yeah.
us to remove
Come
the
back before
condition.
the commission, come back before the city council. And, and there could be very good reasons to change some of those in the future, depending upon, what the project needs are, or things that change, or land that's put together differently and that type of thing.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any other questions or comments?
You were asking that so you could get a duplex on the property.
I didn't hear that.
I
Probably
said
don't
he was
want to.
asking you that so he could get a duplex on his property.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'm going to move for a recess of tonight's meeting, and we will resume on Thursday evening, January 28th at 6:00 PM in these chambers. The public does have another 24 hours subsequent to this recess to contribute any comments, suggestions they want. I do move for a recess. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Walsh has seconded the motion. I'll ask the recording secretary to take a roll call vote.
Yes.
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 Morgan,
Yes.
Ms. Swift,
Yes.
Mr. Venable,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Wheatley.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 votes in favor of that motion.
Very well, by a vote